revealed. How one incredible housekeeper discovered the hidden diagnosis 20 doctors overlooked. Maria stood at the edge of the bustling medical practice, her heart a battleground of hope and despair. Each sweeping motion of her mop felt heavier, imbued with the weight of her father's undiagnosed ailment. The clinical walls around her buzzed with conversations of illnesses, treatments, and medical jargon, an alien language that she found both fascinating and suffocating. As she scrubbed the floor, she cast glances at the doctors in their pristine white coats, discussing cases over steaming cups of coffee, clearly unaware of the profound stories unfolding silently around them. Who would recognize the sacrifices of those like her? The housekeepers who spent their days amidst the sterile chaos, all while fighting battles of their own. Doubt clawed at her insides. Was her father simply another statistic in their eyes? Her mind raced to the latest medical journals she devoured late at night, seeking answers that continuously eluded her. Family dinners transformed into frayed conversations, with her father's tense silence hovering like a shadow. Where did she fit into this widening chasm of frustration and helplessness? Why were medical professionals so quick to overlook cases that didn't fit their neat categories, dismissing them without a second thought? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tensions inside her simmered, each confrontation with the doctors amplifying the frustration that roiled beneath her steady exterior. Surely, she had earned the right to speak. As a housekeeper, her role may have been overlooked, but that didn't diminish her understanding of empathy in the face of human suffering. Perhaps, her father's plight wasn't just a solitary affliction but a reflection of something deeper, something that she had yet to articulate. The moment she confronted the doctors, her voice shaking, her heart raced at the thought of breaking their rigid structure. Would they finally see her? Would they finally listen? Time felt out of her control, a relentless tide swallowing her hope. In the nervous tension of the waiting room, where sick children coughed into stained tissues and anxious parents kept glancing at their watches, Maria's mind fought back against the internal monologue of inadequacy. Every dismissive glance from a doctor, every cough echoed in the sterile air, sharpened her resolve. Yes, she may have been just a housekeeper, but she was also a daughter fighting for her father's life, for validation in a world that preferred convention over chaos. As the clock ticked mercilessly, she found herself on a precipice. Would she risk the fragility of her job, the judgment of those who could easily dismiss her as a mere cleaner? She could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on her. This wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about her breaking through the silence, shattering the dismissive barriers that separated the marginalized from the privileged. As the echoes of consultations faded around her, Maria clutched the edge of a revelation, a spark that might just illuminate the darkness enshrouding her father's condition. The fear of failure curdled in her stomach, but so did the fierce flame of determination. Would she step into that uncertain territory, risking everything for a chance to unearth the truth? Time was slipping away. Maria walked through the sprawling corridors, her heart pounding with both fear and resolve. She had faced daunting situations before in her job, but this moment felt exponentially more critical. Each step toward the physician's lounge became a deliberate act of defiance against her own insecurities. Today, she would not be a silent observer. Today, she would confront the doctors who viewed her as little more than a fleeting shadow in their clinical world. She took a deep breath and entered the lounge, her eyes darting toward the small group of doctors huddled around a table. They looked engaged, immersed in a case discussion that felt worlds away from her reality. Maria hesitated, the familiarity of her role washing over her like a tide of doubt. Would they dismiss her? Would they even let her speak? But as she stared at them identifiable faces that she scrubbed floors beneath, something stirred within her. That seed of determination took root, pushing aside her misgivings. She approached, heart racing, defiance igniting a spark of confidence she scarcely recognized. "Excuse me," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the sea of emotions crashing in her chest. The room fell quiet, eyes turning toward her. She felt their scrutiny as the weight of her existence pressed uncomfortably against the air. "I need to talk to you about my father." "Hima am," a physician interjected, glancing at her work uniform. "This is not a place for," she cut him off, anxiety morphing into fierce anger. "This is exactly the place for it. My father has been suffering, and all of you have missed it." The stunned silence in the room seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Maria could feel the heat rushing to her face, the realization that she was now the focus of their attention. But this time she remained grounded. If they couldn't hear her as a housekeeper, perhaps they would hear her as a daughter crying out for help. "You think because I clean the floors, I don't understand what is happening around me?" She pressed on, the words spilling forth. "He has symptoms that don't match any of your charts, but that doesn't mean he is not in pain. It's like he has vanished into thin air while you all scribble on papers and make sense of cases you can categorize." Some faces softened, curiosity replacing the initial defensiveness. Maria noticed one doctor, Dr. Johnson, leaning in with interest. "Tell us more about his symptoms," he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to inquisitive. In that small moment, a crack formed in the wall dividing professionals from a layperson as she recounted her father's experiences. Her anxiety began to morph into something else, a sense of purpose that filled the void of her previous apprehension. Each description empowered her, as if she were unearthing threads of knowledge she had absorbed from sleepless nights poring over medical literature. With each symptom she described, she was reminded of her own internal struggle, her need for validation, for her father's fight to be recognized. The initial skepticism began to fade, replaced by genuine intrigue. She could see the doctors exchanging glances, the wheels in their heads turning. Maria felt the surge of adrenaline as she realized she may actually influence their thinking. She would not return to the status of an overlooked presence. The trajectory of her father's treatment hinged upon this moment that as questions emerged. She relayed the nuances she had observed. A sense of exhilaration replaced her earlier fear. Her voice became a bridge, connecting the essence of her father's silent agony with the doctor's clinical detachment. But as she left the lounge, adrenaline still coursing through her veins, a new question loomed: had she merely scratched the surface? Or had she stumbled upon something bigger? Something that could unravel everything she believed about her role in this medical world? The answers promised to rewrite not only her father's fate but her own. Would she dare to explore further? Maria felt that familiar sense of urgency building again, nudging her toward an uncharted path. The confrontation in the lounge was merely the beginning. She could feel the tides shifting. What awaited her next? A diagnosis, a hidden truth, or both? The following day dawned with a sun that broke through the hospital's imposing facade, casting shadows that danced along the sterile floors. Maria awoke with the weight of her previous day's revelations still heavy upon her. The thrill of confrontation was mingled with a sense of purpose that was foreign yet exhilarating. She had briefly stepped into the light, her voice ricocheting in a way she had only dreamed of, but now the harsh realities of her position settled back in. As she moved through the corridors, scrubbing floors and collecting linens, she found herself hyper-aware of every conversation around her. The discussions of symptoms, diagnoses, and treatment plans echoed off the walls, and she caught snippets of jargon that once seemed impenetrable. Now, with a layer of understanding peeled back, each term resonated within her, as if the doctors were unwittingly giving her pieces of a puzzle she had only started to piece together. Maria's mind raced with thoughts of her father and the possibilities that lay before her. He could be caught in a web of misdiagnoses, his suffering unnoticed by the experts whose focus remained trained on conventional wisdom. Could she, a housekeeper trained in observation through relentless labor, fill the gaps they had left? Would today bring more clarity? She approached the nurses' station with a newfound determination. The nurses, whom she had observed talking intently about patient care, were now her allies in unearthing the truth behind her father's condition. Their conversations hinted at insights far beyond the lab tests, and Maria felt her heart quicken as she thought of the questions she needed to ask. "Hey, could I talk to you about my father's case?" she ventured, her voice steady yet slightly shaking. A nurse named Clara, whose calm demeanor often eased the tension of the ward, turned to her with a smile. "Of course. What are you concerned about?" Taking a deep breath, Maria relayed everything she knew, from the symptoms to the medical history she had pieced together during sleepless nights. Clara listened, nodding, the smile faltering ever so slightly. "That's interesting," Clara replied thoughtfully. "I haven't seen that combination before. Could be something more complicated than what we recognized at first." With each interaction, Maria's confidence blossomed. There was so much she could learn, and this notion electrified her spirit. She decided to approach Dr. Johnson again, hoping to catch his attention outside the lounge. Their prior conversation had sparked an ember. Perhaps she could ignite a fire in the hallway. She spotted him exiting a patient's room, adjusting his stethoscope. "Dr. Johnson," she called out, suddenly filled with urgency. He turned, eyebrows raised. "Maria, I remember you from yesterday. I had some extra thoughts about my father's symptoms. I think there's something else going on. It's not just the pain. It feels like there's something more sinister beneath the surface." Her voice took on a weight that surprised her. Dr. Johnson's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "You seem to have put a lot of thought into this. Can you write down what you've observed? Bring it to me later and I'll review it." This time, it felt tangible. She was no longer just a bystander but an active player in the narrative of her father's health. Her hands trembled slightly as she planned how she would articulate her observations on paper. As the shift wore on, Maria found herself at the desk, drafting a concise outline of everything that mattered: the symptoms, the inconsistencies, the emotional turmoil associated with her father's decline. The words flowed from her like water, powerful and urgent. But underneath this burgeoning sense of agency lingered a gnawing fear. What if they still didn't listen? What if her efforts only brought more humiliation? However, those thoughts were swiftly brushed aside. She was no longer willing to fade away. She had come too far for that. With a final flourish, she signed her name at the bottom of the paper, Maria Gonzalez. And as she stapled the page together, another realization hit her. She was not merely submitting a report. She was challenging the paradigm that had kept her silent for so long. Having sent the document to Dr. Johnson, she leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, considering once again the ramifications of her actions. Would this embolden her? Or would it bring repercussions from those who preferred her place beneath them? The clock ticked ominously in the distance. Soon, she'd find out the consequences of her courage. As the shadows lengthened down the corridor, Maria could sense it: the moment of truth was drawing near. What awaited her next? An ally turned foe, a hidden diagnosis, or a challenge to her newfound voice? The atmosphere in the hospital shifted palpably as the hours crept forward. Maria felt the pendulum of fate swinging with each passing moment, her spirit oscillating between hope and anxiety. She managed to find small pockets of time between her duties to anticipate Dr. Johnson's response. Not knowing what awaited her became a silent illusion she forced herself to navigate. Returning to the nurse's station felt like stepping onto a stage where all eyes were scrutinizing her, a daunting yet electrifying experience. She recounted her observations with Clara, her nervous energy turning into a language that was both technical and heartfelt. The nurse's acknowledgement of Maria's insights validated her newfound determination. "Your father's case is quite complex," Clara murmured, looking at Maria with a seriousness that made her heart race. "But if you truly believe there are aspects we're missing, we should delve deeper. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to uncover the unseen." Though invigorated by Clara's support, Maria grappled with the lingering doubts gnawing at her. As she scrubs the floors around the nurse's station, every swish of her mop felt heavier, laden with the weight of her mission. Would she embarrass herself again if her suspicions proved unfounded? The thought flickered in her mind, but she pushed it away. Today held the promise of revelation. When the clock finally struck, her heart thudded in rhythm with the chime. Dr. Johnson appeared, the document tucked under his arm, his expression inscrutable. The tight knot in Maria's abdomen unraveled slightly as their eyes met. She stepped forward, feeling her pulse quicken, mixing fear with determination. "I'm ready," she said, the quiver in her voice amplifying the conviction in her intention. He gestured for her to follow him into one of the small consultation rooms. The door clicked shut behind them, and the world outside faded into a muffled backdrop. The sterile white walls loomed over them, an ironic reminder of the very place where life and death danced each day. "Let us go over your notes," Dr. Johnson began, flipping through the stapled observations she had prepared meticulously. Maria watched his brows furrow, mouth tightening as he scanned the words. She could practically feel the gears turning in his mind, and she desperately wanted to reach in and disrupt them with her own interpretations. "You're suggesting a second opinion on the diagnostics?" he asked, pausing for a moment before looking back at her. His expression was thoughtful, almost impressed. "Yes," she replied, the word exploding from within her, buoyed by a momentum she had never felt before. "I think he might need a second set of tests, something beyond the usual routines. It's possible there's an underlying condition that hasn't been accounted for." Dr. Johnson didn't dismiss her. Instead, he leaned against the desk, considering not just her words, but the woman standing before him. This was no longer the quiet housekeeper. She was a force of insight and resolve. The shift felt monumental. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Johnson nodded. "You make a compelling case, Maria. I'll arrange for a consultation with a specialist. You have shown considerable initiative, and I admire that." Every inch of Maria vibrated with elation. She had pierced through the red tape and bureaucracy, standing firm for her father in a world filled with barriers. But just as quickly, a new fear seeped in. What if her father's condition was far worse than they feared? What if exposing the truth only unleashed a storm? Questions and doubts churned within her, but as the meeting concluded, her resolve crystallized. She had taken a step into the fray, a bold plunge into unfamiliar territory where silence once reigned. As she exited the consultation room, the air felt electric. She now realized that the more she engaged, the more empowered she became. Yet the emotional undertow of potential discovery also beckoned. What else might she learn about the world of medicine that lay so close yet felt so far from her grasp? Beyond the corridors, she glimpsed shadows that seemed to linger against the flickering lights. Was there more to unpack? Secrets buried deeper than she initially imagined? The realization that the tide might turn against her loomed large, brewing beneath her skin like the storm clouds outside. What awaited her next? In the uncertainty of this battle, a revelation that tipped the scales, or an argument that exposed fractures in her trust. Stepping back into the bustling life of the hospital felt like plunging into a whirlpool, where all the noise and activity blurred her focus. Maria's heart raced, fueled by exhilaration and a frisson of trepidation. She had opened the door to possibility, yet the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily upon her. She couldn't shake the thought of what lay ahead. Would she be able to navigate this newly claimed territory without losing her way? As she returned to her routine, each task became a juxtaposition of mundanity and tension. She cleaned surfaces, adjusted for drips, and fetched supplies, all while her mind churned with questions. What if she was right? What if there was more beneath the surface? Could she truly understand the complexities of her father's case without formal education or experience in medicine? Flashbacks of doubting herself flickered like the fluorescent lights over her head, yet the spark ignited within her resisted dimming. It felt like an awakening. Memories of Dr. Johnson's nod of approval lingered in her mind, a catalyst that emboldened her. Each moment she spent with patients reinforced the urgency in her heart. She finished a lunch break sitting beside Mrs. Rogers, sharing tales of family, her words reverberating through the air filled with hope. However, as she smiled, a voice inside her reminded her. This was about more than compassion. It was about action. She couldn't allow herself to drown in the ocean of doubt again. Feeling a surge of determination, she sought out Clara, her ally in this labyrinth of healthcare. Their brief discussions had proven invaluable. Maria approached her as she dipped into the supply room, her voice steady and assertive. "Clara, I need your help. What do you think about using the resources of patient advocacy? There might be ways to follow up on my father's case that we haven't considered." Clara paused, surprise reflecting in her eyes. The shift in Maria was palpable. "That's a great idea, Maria. Patient advocates can clarify information and direct us towards specialists who are willing to reevaluate cases," she responded thoughtfully. In that moment, Maria recognized the authority in her voice and the weight of her own convictions, reshaping her role from observer to participant. The advocacy office was tucked away, a hidden corner of the hospital filled with pamphlets, educational posters, and a few supportive faces ready to guide families through the maze of healthcare. As they sat across from the patient advocate, Maria poured out her concerns, articulating the nuances of her father's case. The advocate nodded, taking notes, intrigued by Maria's depth of insight and the determination etched across her features. Her words, now invested with purpose, struck a chord. There was a disarming quality in them, a passion that seemed to resonate beyond the institutional walls. But beneath it all, fear threaded through her thoughts. If she continued down this path, would she risk drawing scrutiny or, worse, disappointment? The advocate ultimately promised to help arrange meetings with specialists while encouraging her to remain persistent. It was a step forward, yet Maria felt the pressure of her ambition weighing heavily. She was no longer a woman relegated to the background. She was stepping into the light, and with it came the responsibility of knowledge and inquiry. Each success begot new questions. Maria felt like she was dancing on the edge of a cliff. Could her father receive help beyond what was already suggested? What would happen if they uncovered something monumental? She felt the ground beneath her shift with every moment that passed, an exhilarating yet terrifying sensation. Armed with a renewed sense of purpose, Maria stood tall as she left the office, casting aside moments of doubt that once threatened to swallow her whole. But as she passed familiar faces in the halls, fear and hope intertwined, pulling her in two directions. Was stepping into this realm of expertise heralding a new era of understanding, or was it merely awakening a storm? With her heart pounding, she couldn't help but wonder which truth lay ahead, a breakthrough or a perilous revelation. Answers were lurking just out of reach, and soon they would come to a head, forcing her to confront not only the healthcare system but unearth insights about herself that she had yet to fathom. The next meeting with the specialists loomed like a storm on the horizon, and with it, her destiny awaited. Would she be ready to meet it? Maria paced in the dimly lit staff break room, the low hum of fluorescent lights buzzing in sync with her racing thoughts. With each nervous step, the weight of her purpose settled more firmly on her shoulders. Engaging in patient advocacy was only the beginning. She could feel the mantle of responsibility growing heavier. Was she truly ready to challenge the system, to be a voice for her father and others who might share his plight? As she sipped her lukewarm coffee, memories of countless patient interactions flooded her mind. They were more than just faces. They were snippets of lives intertwined with her own. Each one came with their own struggles, fears, and hopes. Yet none of their stories had the weight that her father's bore. This was now her life, a blend of personal stakes and professional aspirations. The clock ticked relentlessly, counting down to the meeting with the specialists. She recalled the tidal wave of uncertainty that had threatened to drown her each time she thought about what might come of it. Awareness washed over her. Knowledge was a ladder, and she needed to climb it swiftly. She reached for her notebook, scribbling down questions she needed answers for. What can be done differently? What protocols are being followed? Why were previous tests inconclusive? Each query reinforced her determination, transforming anxious thoughts into calculated plans, as she began to view herself as both advocate and investigator. After a quick huddle with Clara, Maria embarked on her next phase. Clara's encouragement simmered in the background, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this pursuit. Together, they aimed to collect more data, delve into her father's previous test results, and trace back the sequence of treatment he had received. They created a timeline, each detail illuminating the path toward any details that might reveal inconsistencies in care as the day wore on. Anticipation thickened the air. A few colleagues cast knowing glances her way, and in those furtive looks, she sensed their skepticism and intrigue. Did they see her optimism as naivete? Or were they secretly rooting for her drive against the tide of institutional inertia? The question hung in the air, but she couldn't afford to linger on perceptions. Her focus had to remain on the goal. When the time finally approached for the meeting, her stomach twisted into knots. The specialist's office was sprawling and glossy, a stark contrast to the worn-out halls she'd grown accustomed to. Doctors flitted like butterflies, busy but detached, and she felt small in their presence. Yet something within her surged, a voice that had been stifled reminding her she was there for a purpose. Not just to observe but to engage. She took her seat across the table from the specialists. A hush fell. They glanced at one another, first surprised, then intrigued by the intensity in her gaze. Maria began outlining her father's case, feeling the weight of each word. Each explanation sculpted them into a picture, a narrative that had been obscured until now. When she presented the gaps in information and the unconventional connections she had drawn, a flicker of recognition played in the specialist's eyes. It was just a glitch of perception, but she caught it, an unconscious acknowledgement of her diligence. They took notes, and for the first time she felt she was being heard. But as the discussion evolved, Maria sensed the reality of professional ego in the room. One of the specialists, Dr. Keller, challenged her assertions. "These claims are ambitious, but the established protocols dictate our approach," he said with an air of condescension. Her heart raced. The room felt like it was closing in, and doubt clawed at her resolve. Could she withstand the pushback? Did she dare question the very foundation upon which their expertise rested? In that moment, she had to choose. Retreat into silence and accept their dismissal, or confront them head-on with conviction. All the fears that had bolstered her growing determination coalesced into a single potent thought. If not, now when? A deep breath steadied her. But what if those protocols are inherently flawed? Isn't it our duty to examine every angle, especially when lives are at stake? The air thickened with challenge, and she sensed that this was the spark that could ignite more than just dialogue. The moment hung heavy with possibility, and with it came an electric realization. This was her moment to redefine her place not just as a concerned daughter, but as a critical player in the healthcare narrative that as they considered her question, each ticking moment felt like a standoff, the world outside fading into oblivion. If this meeting could breathe life into her father's case, it had the potential to broaden her own understanding of her capabilities, of not just what she had done thus far, but what she was truly capable of achieving. And as they began discussing her father's specific needs, she recognized the stakes coursing through her. This was about more than one man's health. It was about confronting the paradigms that constrained patient care. The future bristled with uncertainty, but the glimmer of possibility shone clear. The conclusions drawn from this meeting could alter her trajectory, but what awaited her down this path both professionally and personally loomed like a storm on the horizon. And the silence that followed, one thought rang loud and clear. This was just the beginning, and she would not shrink from its implications. What lay ahead would demand not only her courage but a reckoning with the very ideals she had begun to carve out. Would she emerge as a catalyst for change, or succumb to the crushing weight of the status quo? The room was charged with unspoken tension as specialists began discussing treatment options, and Maria felt herself grappling with a mix of exhilaration and fear. The stakes had been elevated. No longer was she just a daughter advocating for her father. She was now a confident player in a game that spanned the fragile interface of medicine and morality. Dr. Keller had not only challenged her, but he had inadvertently cast her in the role of defender. Responding to him, she felt the authority of her preparedness bolster her resolve. This moment was pivotal. She realized she was no longer hiding in the shadows of her doubts. She was here to make real contributions, arguments bolstered by data, her father's life at the forefront. "But doctor," she pressed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Previous responses haven't worked. That alone should push us to rethink our strategy, right?" She saw the way her challenge stirred the other doctors, sparking a shift in their dynamics. Engagement flickered like an excited spark in their elaborate structures of beliefs about efficacy and failure. Would they embrace this moment of doubt as an opportunity for inquiry, or would they wallow in the comfort of established practices? To her surprise, Dr. Lee, a younger doctor with a reputation for innovative thinking, leaned forward. "Maria might be onto something," he said, glancing toward his colleagues. "We're often so caught up in guidelines and standard operating procedures that we miss unique patient presentations. It's crucial to adapt." Momentarily, the focus drifted toward Dr. Lee's unexpected support, and Maria felt a swell of validation. But could she trust this unanticipated alliance? Could intuition, fostered by the instinct for survival, really dislodge decades of entrenched medical practice? Impressively, the conversation morphed into an examination of her father's treatment path, shedding light on overlooked details. The specialists discussed new tests that could replace those that yielded inconclusive results. As they deliberated, Maria seized the opportunity. Her notebook felt like a lifeline against uncertainty. She began capturing their thoughts, each word an affirmation of her pioneering role. Yet, with every new suggestion, the undercurrents of resistance surfaced again, especially from Dr. Keller, who seemed not so quick to let go of his authority. "Isn't it dangerous to indulge in speculation over tried and true methods?" he asserted, his tone dripping with condescension. "We must recognize the validity of our established protocols." His words struck a nerve, but Maria clung to the resolve that had sprouted within her. Yet, she countered, breathless but fortifying, "We cannot ignore that one person's established protocol could be another's systematic failure." Silence enveloped the room momentarily as they processed her words. It was no longer just a daughter's defense. It was an ideological trial. The air grew thick with potential, and for the first time during this meeting, she recognized the shift beyond the clinical conversation. It was personal and deeply so. The specialists began exchanging glances. Maria sensed that the collective inertia was wavering. She saw Dr. Lee nodding thoughtfully, his expressions uncertain but receptive to her narrative. Maybe she could be that catalyst, a flare igniting the path toward an uncharted territory in patient care where empathy and science intertwined. With the conversation transitioning from treatment techniques to potential outcomes, she felt surges of hope. But the anxiety of what lay beyond loomed large. What if the doctors eventually counted on her insights? What if they only noticed the cracks in their expertise and grew resistant to change? This tangled web of doubt and ambition tightened around her as the meeting's end drew closer. She knew that the fight ahead was not over. She had set the wheels in motion, but to enact real change, she needed allies, those willing to stir the pot alongside her, share the burden and the consequential risk with honesty and courage. Standing up to the weight of medical establishment left her invigorated yet battered, a strange duality surging within her. The meeting concluded abruptly, and, as she stepped out of the nuances of conversation, Maria felt a sense of permanence settle into her bones. This wasn't an isolated victory. It was a beginning at war, not just for her father, but for others left suffocated under bureaucracy. As Maria walked away from the sterile brilliance of the specialist's office, one thought gripped her. If she had stirred a wave of potential change here, what else was she capable of discovering? And would she have the strength to confront what those discoveries might entail? Would the stakes escalate higher, drawing her even deeper into this world of faceless institutions and anonymous hopes? The answer to that question hung as tantalizingly as it was foreboding. Emerging from the meeting, Maria could still feel the lingering heat of debate echoing in her mind. Outside, the crisp air felt invigorating, but the aura of uncertainty loomed heavy. She took a deep breath, her chest tightening with the weight of her thoughts. This was more than just a dialogue for her father's treatment. It was a challenge to the very foundation of a system that often ignored the unique complexities of individual cases. As she navigated the bustling hallway, she replayed the conversations in her mind like a sequence of intricate dance moves. The supportive nod from Dr. Lee ignited a flicker of hope. If he genuinely believed in what they could achieve together, perhaps her instincts and the data she had gathered weren't just whims. They were solid ground on which to build a revolution in care methodology. A chill ran through her as she envisioned confronting Dr. Keller again. Those hardened eyes, the confident set of his shoulders, he embodied the very rigidity she questioned. How could she communicate the urgency of compassion without being dismissed? Could she forge a parallel path without losing sight of the respect due to seasoned authorities? Decisions raced through her mind at a dizzying pace. Maria needed to collect more information, not just to defend her father's case, but to substantiate her emerging position in this world. Might there be other patients with similar conditions who had also faced invisible walls? Each story could serve as both evidence and motivation. Instead of a lone warrior, she could transform this fight into a coalition and alliance of shared experiences. That evening, she turned her modest living room into a command center. Stacks of medical journals and her father's health records transformed into mountains of information that could validate her instincts. Hours melted away as she sifted through data, her fingers dancing over the pages. Between clicks on her laptop and ancient texts, a pattern started to emerge. Patients often described overlapping symptoms that had been dismissed as side effects of other treatments. It was both heartbreaking and illuminating. This newfound knowledge sharpened her focus. Each case became a testament to the human experience, fraught with nuance and need. She was gathering not just data, but stories that spoke to the challenges many faced under the weight of standardized care. If she could gather enough case studies, perhaps she could create a presentation that combined emotion with analytics, a compelling narrative to disrupt established norms. The clock struck midnight, but fatigue was an afterthought. Driven by passion and purpose, a fire had ignited within her that she couldn't extinguish. The seductive whisper of doubt was barely audible now. She was in control. As the sun broke over the horizon, illuminating the dusty corners of her living room, Maria felt another surge of determination. With her newfound perspective, she would not only advocate for her father but also for every patient marginalized in a complex system. It was time for action, but action required strategy. Creating an outreach campaign to gather testimonies from others in similar binds could be the bridge she needed. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but as doubt tightened its grip, she pushed back with resolve. Her moral compass redirected her. You can't change a system from the outside. To create real impact, she needed to swim through the murky waters of bureaucracy without letting fear overtake her. Yet still, apprehension nestled in her mind. Would the legalities and complexities of patient rights entrap her efforts? Could sharing these personal narratives shake the very grounds of medical authority? Or would it crush her under scrutiny? The stakes were rising, and with them, Maria felt her pulse quicken. Each moment of action brought her closer to a potential reckoning with Dr. Keller and his supporters. But could this fight expand? The urgency for change hung in the air as Maria prepared herself for the next meeting, knowing that the real confrontation loomed just ahead. Would she have the courage to lead this charge? Or would the enormity of this endeavor shatter her burgeoning confidence? The answer was yet to unfold as she steeled herself for the battle drawing nearer. The early mornings had always held a sense of promise for Maria, but today, the sun's rays felt more like a spotlight illuminating her path. The day of reckoning had arrived. She had spent the previous night preparing her notes, ensuring every detail regarding her father's case and the accompanying testimonies from other patients was meticulously organized. With each story she uncovered, her resolve had strengthened. Every shared experience added weight to her cause as she walked into the conference room. The ambient buzz of chatter enveloped her, blending with the sterile scent of antiseptic. She spotted Dr. Keller at the head of the table, his posture exuding authority that both intimidated and compelled her. Could she truly break through the fortress of his conviction? With her heart racing, Maria took a seat, her eyes searching for allies. It was Dr. Lee who finally broke the tension as he acknowledged her presence with a nod. Maria felt the flicker of solidarity, yet it seemed she still stood alone at the precipice of a mighty challenge. The meeting commenced, and the discussion began to spiral into familiar presentations of data, the coldly detached graphs clutching at the heart of everything she opposed. Here was yet another iteration of a process that glossed over voices in favor of numbers. When it was her turn to speak, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the stack of papers before her. She felt the weight of eyes upon her, including Dr. Keller's, a mix of scrutiny and skepticism. Taking a deep breath, She began, weaving together her father's narrative with the testimonies of others who had been marginalized. Each case was not just a statistic, but a heartbeat caught in a system that often stripped the human experience away. People are more than their diagnoses, Maria asserted, her voice firm as it rose above the stark prose of clinical detail. These cases cannot exist in silos. Overlapping symptoms have led to misdiagnoses that have cost lives and dignity. We owe it to our patients to explore every avenue of possibility, not to conform to a rigid protocol. As she continued, something began to shift in the room. The air thrummed with a current of palpable tension. She noticed Dr. Keller's eyes narrowing slightly, the skepticism hardening into something sharper defiance. Despite the rising stakes, Maria felt an invincible rush of clarity. This wasn't just about her father. It was about redefining an entire approach to care. Halfway through her presentation, she introduced testimony from a former caregiver who had observed the misalignment in the treatment protocols. The woman's words had ignited an emboldened fire within Maria, and she used them as a bridge to illustrate the dire need for a human-centered approach to medicine. This was not merely about her mission for her father. It was about ensuring no one else would suffer in silence. As the meeting came to a close, she sensed unease rippling through the boardroom. Dr. Keller's voice rose above the murmur, laced with challenge. Empathy is vital, but how do you propose we implement a system that satisfies both compassion and protocol? Maria felt the intensity of the moment wrap around her like a shroud. The battle for respect, recognition, and change was underway. Her heart raced, the answer taking shape in her mind. This cannot be a binary decision, she replied, her voice a steady calm amidst the brewing storm. We must be willing to not only reflect on established paradigms but to redefine them. I can compile the data, gather more testimonies, and collaborate with other medical professionals who believe in reform. This isn't an insurmountable conflict. It's an opportunity to reshape care into something that honors the complexities of each patient. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the slight rustle of note-taking and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. Whether her challenge would be met with acceptance or pushback loomed. Her pulse quickened as she felt the mounting pressure of dependence on the board's decision. But it was Dr. Lee who broke through the tension. I believe we can find a way forward, he said slowly, a note of caution mixed with hope. But it will require courage from all of us. With that, Maria felt her spirit bolster. Perhaps she wasn't alone after all. The seeds of change were taking root, yet she knew there were dark waters to traverse, not least of all confronting Dr. Keller's influence. As the meeting adjourned, Maria stepped into the hallway, acutely aware of the weight still resting on her shoulders. The thought clawed at her. Could she navigate the pushback while keeping her vision intact? Confrontation was inevitable, but the prospect of resilience sparked a newfound energy within her. The battle ahead was daunting, and the moment of truth loomed ever closer. Would her growing network of allies animate the movement she envisioned, or would she find herself overwhelmed, the tide of challenge swallowing her resolve? The next moment awaited, and so did the real test of her fortitude. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Maria stood stronger in her role as a tenacious advocate for her father's health. The conference room's echoes of skepticism and surprise reverberated through her mind, a constant reminder of her capabilities and the budding transformation taking place within. Each interaction, each pointed conversation from the specialists solidified her position not just as a housekeeper, but as an indispensable voice in this intricate world of healthcare. As the specialists engaged in their standard routines, Maria found herself celebrated in corridors where once she brushed past without recognition. Conversations fizzled into discussions of unconventional ideas, patients who dared to share their narratives, and methodologies that allowed for emotional and clinical weaving. This, she discovered, was the heartbeat of progress, one that demanded courage, persistence, and a voice fierce enough to challenge the status quo. One evening, while reviewing her father's latest lab results with Clara, she caught wind of tentative approvals for additional tests. A bittersweet relief washed over her as she realized that they had recognized her contributions. They're finally listening, she whispered, awe clutching her throat. Clara grinned, her eyes shining with pride. You initiated this change, Maria. Your voice empowered them to see beyond protocols. This moment crystallized her growth. She had become a crucial player in the dialogue of care, bridging the gap between the clinical and the personal. Months of shared testimonies later, the change Maria longed for materialized in a formal presentation dedicated to health inclusivity. A landmark event at the hospital, it spotlighted individual experiences and the significance of treating patients as whole beings. The executives, at first skeptical, gradually acknowledged the need for this innovation. As she stood before an audience filled with both supporters and skeptics, Maria's words flowed with conviction, carrying the weight of those who had been overlooked. I stand here today not as a housekeeper but as a daughter, not merely relaying my father's story, but as a voice for countless patients trapped within rigid structures, she proclaimed. The room fell silent. She felt the air quiver with curiosity and impromptu respect. Each anecdote brought nods of acknowledgement, prompting a collective reevaluation of the medical landscape they navigated. When the applause echoed through the chamber like a thundercloud dissipating, Maria recognized the culmination of her journey. Not only had she forged an inseparable bond between hard data and empathy, but she also carved out a place for herself within a system previously designed to exclude her. In the weeks following, the collaboration between Maria and the hospital staff deepened. Best practices bloomed alongside their newfound perspectives. The individual narratives enriched their data-driven protocols, cultivating a model that redefined patient care. Maria accomplished this not through the sweeping gestures of bravado but through genuine perseverance. She had proven her point she belonged here, and her contributions were invaluable. Her personal evolution extended beyond mere advocacy. It emboldened her professional identity. Maria found herself stepping into a mentor's role for newly recruited staff, sharing her insights on empathy's role in treatment plans. With confidence, she began expressing her vision of inclusive care at various medical forums, basking in the accolades and recognition that accompanied her speeches. Now, as she walked through those once daunting corridors filled with familiarity and purpose, Maria felt empowered, anchored by a profound sense of purpose. Her father's health improved, but more importantly, Maria had unearthed her own. She matched her relentless commitment as a caretaker with a daring impulse to transform an institution, dedicated to ensuring that no story would go unheard, and no patient dismissed. Amidst the hustle and bustle of hospital life, her heart swelled with pride. Maria stood tall, her voice resonating within the walls that once echoed with her fears. This was her triumph. This was the future she had envisioned not just for her father, but for all navigating unseen illnesses. She had become more than a mere housekeeper. She was a catalyst for change as the sun set on the horizon, casting its golden light upon her. Maria smiled fiercely. She had lived through confinement, doubt, and exclusion, yet emerged as a beacon of hope. She had achieved what once felt unattainable, a transformative resolve that defied the barriers placed before her. To all who have followed Maria's journey, remember, you need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and showcase the importance of personal transformations like Maria's. Comment with your reactions and theories about Maria's extraordinary conclusion. Share instantly this story with at least 5 friends who are trapped in their own battles and need to see that they, too, can emerge victorious. This is the moment to show your support. The power of transformation is within us all. Don't wait even one more second.